20 years after the release of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, director Robert Wise approached Paramount and asked to do a director's cut of the film, which would include a new sound mix and several new visual effects.
I wanted to do a final check cut and all on the film, so I went with Paramount to find out if it would be okay if I did it, and they said yes, that would be fine. So that's what I've been working on with Mike Battistino, is getting what should have been my final cut of the film when we first put it out.
My partner David Fine and I worked with Robert Wise on several projects over the past 10 years, but we had to know him a little while before he was comfortable enough to start talking about Star Trek. Eventually, he asked us if we would be interested in working on a director's cut with him, and we were thrilled. Who wouldn't be?
Paramount has been completely supportive on the project from beginning to end. We're just absolutely thrilled with how well that's going. And it really is a labor of love for us, and to be able to see Bob come back and look at it and just see, it's almost freeing for him.
So a big question was, who would we get to supervise the visual effects end of things? And it was my partner Dave who suggested Darren Doctorman for that task. We'd worked with him on several projects before.
The concern was that everything needed to match as it was from 1979. So that was the directive that we discussed with Darren at the start, was that whatever we produced had to match the shots. We really, in the end, wanted to make sure that whatever new effects work ended up into this film, it would have only have been what was possible to produce in '79.
It started out with some serious storyboarding of every shot that we wanted from our great, gigantic list of shots.
We laid out the basic shots. We consulted the storyboards from 1978.
The guys have managed to get from the archives some really rare stuff in terms of the storyboards.
We went through the storyboards from the project from '79 and found the shots that we needed. And there were a bunch of them that we used, and we went back and redrew them a little more detailed so that we'd be able to visualize them more clearly.
Darren worked with Steve Berg, who was a noted conceptual designer. He actually did some storyboards that were extending or bringing to further detail some of the original concepts.
I saw those storyboards and I was like, who did these storyboards? And Darren's telling me, these are original storyboards from the film they just never did. And I was just really shocked by that. And I was like, that's what they were supposed to do? You mean it was supposed to look like this?
There was something really wonderful about being able to go back and redo some of this material and update some of this material, but make it look as if it was shot back then, even to the extent of getting the amount of dirt right and the amount of grain right.
I had the goal of making sure that that the effects did not take away from, just augmented the effects from 1979. Our goal here is to honor the film, the filmmakers, the visual effects artists from the time, and to present something that they would be happy and satisfied with, or is something that looks like what they would have produced at the time.
Matching the look of our computer-generated images to the film was quite a challenge. A lot of it had to do with the lighting. We had to match the lighting just right.
One of the great advantages we had on this was that we were able to get the original shooting models. We got the Enterprise and a couple of the other miniatures to look at and see exactly what they were doing in terms of building the models. So, when there was ever any question as to, how long should this be, well, it's right over there. Go look at it.
Lots of times I'd be like, I'm trying to build this part on the secondary hull or on the neck or something, and I'm like, even with a blueprint or photographs, you're like, what does that look like? I can't get the proportion. So you just walk outside, crawl into the crate, and just like, oh, so that's what it looks like. Go back out and build it.
One of the things that bothered me about the Vulcan shot, we see the clip of Spock right before the second matte painting, where he's covering his face from the sun. And then we cut to the next shot. Not only is there's no sun, there's no sky. We can't tell what we're looking at. But now we have not only the sun, we have the beautiful orange sky, we have the craggy peaks on Vulcan and this ancient temple and these gorgeous statues. which were all planned for in earlier storyboards, and we have them. And all these shots are based on existing storyboards.
Well, actually, the entire set was created in 3D, and just that allowed us for movement, so we can move statues around and tweak things and adjust things for lighting and whatnot. There was a digital Spock for, there's a long shot where Spock walks up to the statues.
Dave Morton created CGI Spock, and he also created a CGI planet. We blended a lot of elements, Dave and I. He did, I'd say, 90% of the work, though, because it's awesome, of the Vulcan planet.
The CG Spock was kind of a hard sell, because until you see it, you never believe that you could pull it off and have it be able to cut with a real-life character. Early on, when we were planning on doing this project, I took 3 or 4 images and did some Photoshop composites. And one of these shots was the San Francisco tram station. While it is a beautiful matte painting, and it works really well with the footage that they shot, I was thinking that, well, I realized what the problem was. When they had the Captain Kirk's tram coming down, they had to have a wall on the set because they just didn't have enough time to build an expansive tram station set. So you have the tram coming up against basically a flat wall. So I basically went into Photoshop and did some matte paintings, grabbed the elements from the original film, did some extensions on it, and figured out where the matte layers would be and where we needed things to pass behind other things. And I matched the angle up, had the trams coming in, and I put my little Starfleet shuttle from the original series in the upper level and had that taking off in the second shot.
So we actually had some people in San Francisco who are fans of the movie, and they went out with a camera and took pictures of the bridge from the vantage points that you see in the movie and that are on the storyboards. And we took those digital pictures, and we didn't want it the original movie had a matte painting, and we didn't want to just substitute it with a picture of San Francisco. So we took the image of San Francisco, and the first thing we did was we sort of futurized it to what San Francisco is supposed to look like in the years of Star Trek. One of the things we definitely had in mind in all this is what Gene Roddenberry's vision of Star Trek has always been. And he felt Earth is beautiful, Earth is perfect, there's no pollution, there's no problem, there's no famine. And so we wanted to reflect that in these images of San Francisco, making them very idealistic and pretty.
What, sir? Mr. Decker. Wormhole. Get us back on impulse power. Full reverse.
I worked on the wormhole effect, and we wanted to basically incorporate the ship into the shot, show the wormhole dissipating, and show a better explosion than was in the original movie. The original wormhole was created with a laser, I think, and smoke. And I had to recreate it in the computer to line up with what was done in the 70s, which was pretty difficult. And after that, I took the 3D computer model of the Enterprise and composited that into the shot.
V'ger was a very specific challenge because during the film we do see bits and pieces of it as the Enterprise is flying over and it's finally revealed as this enormous thing. But we never actually got to see it fully shown to us as an audience. Steve was able to generate an amazing structural V'ger model that would stand up to the camera angles that we were planning.
I worked on the setting up and the
The whole putting together all the shots of V'ger when it was seen from the outside in space. Jon Teska worked on a few of our animated textures on that.
When I saw the film originally, I had no real awareness of what the overall shape of the ship was or how it looked from a distance. We always see it in these little close-up sections.
I think in the actual movie there's one shot on one of the tactical displays that shows just an outline of the shape that's V'ger, but without reference in the rest of the movie, you never could quite tell that that's exactly what they were looking at. It looks a little out of place.
So Steve Berg was extremely helpful in helping to flesh it out, you know, taking all these different views and then figuring out how they would fit together, and that was how we were able to finally see the exterior shot of the V'ger.
For all the interior V'ger shots, Jon Teska did those, and he did a wonderful job. I think one of the best shots is this brand new interior of V'ger, where you see the really tiny Enterprise flying through a part of the ship that we hadn't seen before. That shot was all CG.
The very tricky thing is it's so dark in there that you have to show just enough, but not too much, you know. So that was an interesting challenge.
The whole shot where the crew comes up on the elevator, and when they're first pulling up, you know, to the V'ger island, it ended up being 100% all CG shot because they were going to be very small, so we didn't really need any major detail on the characters. So, you know, if you looked at them close, they just don't, you know, they're just kind of, you know, stick figures really with some clothing on, but they have the basic shape and the basic colors, and when they're only, you know, half an inch tall on the screen, you really can't tell.
The complexity of V'ger is animating the components that create the structure as it forms. So as we have the volumetric lights, which is one part, the cloud of lights that forms around the island, and as they gravitate into the arms, the spidery arms of V'ger, that's really the complexity of the whole thing. More of an animation problem than of a strictly modeling problem. As we approach V'ger, there's a cloud of points of light that appear. What we needed to do was to provide a path for every one of these lights so that they would end up in a position in which arms of steps could form. A light would be in a cloud, it would precipitate into a layer. That layer would eventually settle down into where steps are to form. Steps appear there as the light disappears, and these steps eventually they grow out long enough so that one of the arms is approaching us as, you know, towards the Enterprise.
The time we've spent with Bob is very precious, and it's just as rewarding for us to see the joy that he has in viewing the work and seeing his original vision come closer together.
I think the fact that Bob has been able to go back and make some adjustments delights me.
I think it's just great that Robert Wise has had this opportunity to do it the way he wanted to do it originally.
I think it's wonderful of Paramount to give Bob Wise the chance to do something extra on Star Trek: The Motion Picture.